Yeehaw, students, let's get ready to talk about classical India. In your table of contents, you should follow up your classical China notes that we took the other day with classical India and whatever page number you need. So go ahead and do that. I can wait. So, the story for the Indian civilization begins, of course, with the Indus River Valley and the Ganges Plain and the Ganges River. Those are still important. They're sort of the life-giving, and what we see, the Ganges becomes important religiously. We'll get to that later on, though. Here's the Indus River Valley. That's where the Indian story starts. And it starts with the major one that we're going to talk about is the Harappan civilization, which is living around at the same time as the Sumerians are starting to decline. Egypt is right at its height, and just before China that we just saw with the classical period in China, starting with the Zhou dynasty. So Harappa was one of the city-states along the Indus River, along with Mohenjo-Daro. And those are very interesting because there are still ruins there. We can actually excavate, and we are excavating, learning more about what life was like for the early civilizations along the Indus River. Very interesting. Those two city-states are important for you. Equally important is to recognize and be able to compare and contrast the development of civilizations around the world, because Sumerians in Mesopotamia are developing and thriving right around the same time as the Egyptians and the Chinese. We haven't discussed the Hittite, we will, and the Indians. And what's interesting in this is the development of the language, that they all pretty much have the same symbol. So this should show some human commonalities, that as a human species, we all started farming about the same time. We all started developing civilizations, therefore, about the same time. We all sort of had the same intellectual development about the same time. So this is pretty cool. This is all these symbols represent a mountain, a hill, a mound, whatever, citadel. So the story that we talk about when it comes to India is the Aryan invasion. That's where it starts. Because beforehand, it's just minor city-states like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, just river valley civilizations. When the Aryans invade, they bring with them new technology, they bring with them new religion, they bring with them new methods, and that's what we'll see here in just a moment when we discuss the different ages. And as you guys get into your text and your resources, the main designation you need to know on those has to do more with literature, but the Vedic and the epic ages of India, it's kind of broken up into two different periods. Most important that you need to know about them is the ancient texts that the Aryans either compiled, brought with them, used, whatever. These two texts are not the only holy books for Hinduism, but they're among some of the more important ones. There's also collections of sayings and things like that. So the Mahabarata and the Upanishads are two very ancient texts that are important in Indian history. They come into play with Hinduism. The caste system, not caste, caste. This is the social structure. It's also the religious structure. If you think about a Persian chart, which we've discussed in class, the Persian, political, economic, religious, social, intellectual, artistic, near geography. This caste system fits into almost every single one of them except geographic. Politically, the caste system determines where you are in the power structure. Economically, the caste system determines what your job is. Religiously, the caste system determines where you are born in reincarnation. Intellectually, artistically, you cannot leave your caste. If you're a Sudra, you must be a Sudra. And you're born one, you will die one. Your children will be Sudras. Now, Dharma is something that comes into play because with Hinduism, it relies very heavily on the caste system and the concept of Dharma, D-H-A-R-M-A, but you can do your own research on that one in the text. Dharma is sort of religious obligation or your laws you have to follow, sort of. It's not written down. It's sort of a cultural understanding of sorts. But Dharma kind of dictates what you can and cannot do. So if you are a Sudra, you have certain expectations and jobs. The untouchables are the people that really don't even belong in the caste system because they're sort of not considered part of society. But everybody has a role to play. So if you are a Kshatriya, a warrior, and you are a good warrior, you do everything you should do, you will have good karma. If you follow the Dharma, you will have good karma. When you have good karma, the ultimate idea is if you're a Sudra, for instance, and you are the best darn Sudra you could be, your ultimate goal is to be reborn, reincarnated, higher and higher in the caste system until eventually you reach nirvana, which is full union with Brahma, the ultimate existence, sort of, if we were to give it a name, God, become one with God. So nirvana is the ultimate payoff from reincarnation. That's the ultimate goal for Hinduism. It's a very vibrant religion, and we'll discuss it in greater detail down the line. But out of Hinduism, we see another major world religion develop, which is Buddhism, starting with Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama was a prince who witnessed some suffering, and it kind of freaked him out a little bit. He saw an old man, a sick man, and a dead man, and he kind of wondered, why do we suffer so much? And so he freaked out and ran away. He left his riches, left his family, left his throne, and just went wandering, searching for the understanding of why is life so full of suffering. He sought out various holy men, and none of them really had answers that were satisfactory to him, so he sat and meditated, and he tried starving himself, and he tried gorging himself. He tried extremes all the way around until he finally realized that moderation is pretty much the answer to everything. And he came up with what he said was the secret of life, the reason for suffering, and how to get rid of it. So he had what's called the Four Noble Truths. So in your notes, make sure you write down Four Noble Truths. And then using your text or your prep book, you can get more detail on that. But the Four Noble Truths boil down to the first, which is life is full of suffering. The second noble truth is suffering is caused by desire. And desire isn't necessarily, oh baby, sexual type desire, but more of just you want something that you don't have. So you want a better job, you want nicer shoes, you want better food, you want a bigger house, you want more friends, you want fewer friends, whatever the desire might be. So because you have that desire, you're not happy, so therefore you are suffering in a way. Well, in order to eliminate suffering, the third noble truth says eliminate desire. Sounds easy enough. All you have to do is stop desiring things, but that's where things get kind of twisty-bendy for the old brain noodle. Desiring to have no desire is still a desire. You want desirelessness, but that in and of itself is a desire. So it gets really, really bakey on your brain, man. In the end, what he said, in order to eliminate desire, you have to live the right way. And that's the fourth noble truth. The Eightfold Path is the way to eliminate desire. And the Eightfold Path is not on here, and you can find your own notes and write it on the interactive side of your notebook. But the Eightfold Path is having the right mental attitude, having the right actions to make yourself be a better person and eliminate desire. So we see the Mauryan dynasty. This is the first dynasty that we really talk about in depth for the classical period because it's sort of the foundation for the rest of everybody else. Asoka is the ruler we'll talk about. He's the most important one out of there, but this is not the most important dynasty. We refer to the Gupta as the Golden Age, but we'll see why shortly. Here's the Mauryan dynasty. You see where the Indus River Valley was. The Mauryan dynasty adds a substantial chunk of territory right up along, beginning up at the Himalayas in northern India. The first one that we really talk about that we need to be concerned with is Chandragupta Maurya. You can see the dates there, 321 BCE, for about 23 years, who added the green that you see there. That's the Mauryan Empire under Chandragupta. Now, he gained the Indus Valley from Seleucus, who was the founder of the Seleucid Empire, which we will discuss when we get to the Greeks, Persians, Hellenistic, all that. The Hellenistic Empire, after Alexander the Great died, was broken up, and one of the empires that remained was called the Seleucid Empire. Well, the Mauryans unified northern India and gained that territory from the Seleucid. Now, once they were unified as a dynasty, it was broken up into legislative or administrative, I guess is more appropriate, administrative districts, which it's easier to manage. His grandson, Chandragupta Maurya's grandson, is the most important one we talk about. He is well remembered even today as being one of the greatest rulers in Indian history, Asoka. Everybody say it with me now, Asoka. So Asoka adds the blue kind of purple color here. Around the year 250 BCE, this is what we see. So we're talking 2,200 years ago-ish. It's interesting that he stops here just past the Deccan Plateau. There's an interesting story that goes along with that. That I'll say in a moment. But what's something that's important about Asoka, apart from being just a great leader, he created this law code that he had displayed in major areas so that people could know what was expected of them, sort of the way we see with Hammurabi, or saw, I should say, with Hammurabi. He's the most remembered ruler, and what's interesting is he converted to Buddhism, which was a big deal because India was a Hindu country and had been Hindu for almost 1,000 years. He converted to Buddhism, and I mentioned this Deccan Plateau here. And the story is that as he had finished conquering at a particular battle, he looked out on the carnage that his army had inflicted and all the bodies and blood and tens of thousands of dead people, and kind of freaked him out a little bit because he realized he just killed a lot of people. He was responsible for it, and it kind of freaked him out. So he had a spiritual breakdown, sort of, and he ended up converting to Buddhism and devoting his life to peace, because Buddhism is very much about respect for life. So following the Mauryan dynasty, we see it sort of breaks down in India for a little bit. So by the year 100, the most important one that we see, really, is the Kushan kingdom. But we can kind of gloss over that and talk about the Golden Age. Any extra details you need on this, I will advise very strongly. Look in your textbook, look at the Kushan, and jot down some information on them from your text. The Gupta, founded by Chandra Gupta, interestingly. Not Chandragupta Maurya, but Chandra Gupta. Chandragupta, it's known as he extended the borders, the Gupta Empire extended the borders, kind of pushed out or sort of undid the breakdown, pushed out the other people that were in power in the various minor kingdoms and created one formed kingdom, which was the Gupta. Extended the borders, as you can see here in this map, smaller than what we saw with the Mauryan, but no less important, because this is where we see the classical age of trade really taken off with, and this is where, like the Silk Road, India is right in the middle of it. Coming from China, going to the Mediterranean, from the Mediterranean going to China, everybody had to stop through here, or pretty much did stop through here, either by sea or by land. So trade becomes very important in India as a result. The spices from the east, the silks, also the things that India would produce, like cotton goods and other spices. So India was the hub, and they had a lot of trade as a result, which resulted in a lot of prosperity, which is also why we call it the Golden Age. Let me go back a little bit here. Probably could have paused that, but that's okay. You guys are fine with it. So the Gupta, for about 300 years, and if you recall the Chinese dynastic cycle, about 300 years, so it's kind of cool the way that works out when we apply that template to other places. It lasts about 300 years, and it's known as the Golden Age, and that's something that we'll see as we go through class, of advances in math, science, art, medicine. They just had a lot of really major advances, and we don't really see an Asoka figure in here. Chandragupta is the founder, but we don't really pay attention to the individual rulers in the Gupta dynasty, more of the achievements of the dynasty itself. The Gupta is the Golden Age. That's something that needs to be remembered. Gupta was the Golden Age. Now, you have the Persian chart that you need to take care of, where you discuss the political, economic, thank you, Prezi, I know that, religious, social, intellectual, artistic, and near geography. Near geography is most easily completed because Indus River Valley, northern Indian subcontinent, that's about it. But politically, you do need to have your Persian chart completed with the important dynasties, some of the important rulers, or the most important ruler, let's say, and what the government looked like, how it operated. What was the economics like? That's where you'll pay most attention to the Gupta dynasty with trade, the Silk Road passing through and all of the trade goods that they got. Religious, pretty easy on that. Hinduism, and then Buddhism. Social structure, very easy again. Caste system. Intellectual, you need to look at the achievements of the Gupta dynasty. I just said math, science, medicine, astronomy, etc. You need to make sure you know the big major advances that came out of this golden era. Artistic, know the characteristics of Indian art, and you've seen a little bit of it, like with the statue of the Buddha and the statue of, I think it was Shiva previously. Know the artwork and know the connection to mainly the religion. That is Chapter 3. Enjoy.